All right, strap yourselves in for this one because you guys have sent us into some seriously spooky territory.
Oh, yeah.
We're diving deep into 4 first-hand accounts, all pulled from a YouTube video called 4 Nightmarish True Scary Stories by the channel Mr. Nightmare.
You know what's interesting about these stories? We're not talking about, like, polished folk tales or those urban legends that everyone's heard a million times.
Right.
These are, like, real people claiming they actually went through these events.
Yeah, and that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating.
Totally.
We may not be able to, like, definitively prove or disprove any of this stuff, but
Right.
what is it about these stories that makes them so gripping? So let's jump right in
Let's do it.
with the first story, The Haunted House Next Door.
Okay.
So we have 2 young brothers, 10 and 12 years old,
Classic.
who decide to sneak out
Oh, no.
and explore an abandoned house that everyone says is haunted. I mean,
Wow.
what could possibly go wrong?
Right. Well, I think it's fascinating how this story just hits all those classic haunted house tropes.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that tap into our deepest fears.
It's true.
This house is described as old, isolated, broken windows. It's practically begging to be the setting of a horror movie.
You're so right.
Yeah,
And even just hearing you describe it, I can already feel the goosebumps coming on.
of course.
And then the storyteller just like pulls you in even deeper with these vivid sensory details.
Yes.
You know, hand-cranked flashlights, that stifling heat inside,
Oh, yeah.
working floorboards.
It's like you're right there with them.
It really is, yeah.
And, think about it.
Uh-huh.
This fear of the dark, the fear of the unknown,
Right.
it's primal. Right. It's been hardwired into us for millennia.
Totally.
Like back then, darkness hid predators. Unfamiliar places could mean danger.
You're right.
So it makes sense that even today, that instinctual unease just lingers, especially in a place like this.
Yeah, it's like those primal instincts. They're just so powerful.
Totally.
And just when you think the story can't get any creepier, boom, this deafening bang on a closed door seemingly from the other side.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I bet those kids were ready to bolt right out of there.
Absolutely. I mean, talk about suspense, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like that silence before the bang, how sudden and loud it is.
Yeah.
It just triggers that immediate fight or flight response.
Oh, for sure.
It's the kind of moment that makes you jump, even if you're just listening to the story.
You know, it's funny because, of course, they get grounded by their parents,
Well, yeah.
which is completely understandable.
Of course.
But then, like, a couple nights later,
Yeah.
one of the brothers wakes up to the sound of his flashlight being cranked outside his window.
Oh, way.
Oh, yeah.
That's terrifying.
So was that like a dream brought on by the experience, or was it something more?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
Is it just like lingering fear playing tricks on his mind? Or was it real?
Right.
It makes you think about how much of what we perceive
Yeah.
is actually influenced by our experiences, our expectations.
Absolutely.
It's like, are we just seeing what we expect to see?
Right.
Especially when we're already on edge.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to our second story.
All right.
This one's called The Whispering Stall.
Ooh, okay.
And this one takes place in a university restroom that's rumored to be haunted by a woman.
Spooky.
Now, the narrator's friend claims to have heard taps running and a woman humming coming from a locked stall.
That already gives me the chills.
Yeah, it's pretty creepy, right?
And like, you have to wonder about the power of suggestion in a story like this, you know?
Absolutely.
The narrator mentions that this university is known for its ghost stories.
Right.
So doesn't that just prime you to interpret anything unusual as evidence of the paranormal?
Of course.
Yeah.
Especially in a place with that kind of reputation.
Right.
It's like we're almost looking for confirmation of what we already believe.
You're so right.
Right. And then to make it even creepier,
Yeah.
a janitor actually confirms these rumors of a ghost and warns them not to use the restroom after 5:00 p.m.
Do you think he actually believed it? Or was he just like playing into the legend?
Ooh, that's a good question.
No, and maybe just trying to keep students out of the restroom after hours?
Maybe. But either way, it adds another layer to the story, right?
Oh, for sure.
It makes you wonder how much of our reality is actually shaped by the stories we tell and the beliefs we hold.
It's true.
I mean, think about it. That humming could have been anything.
Right.
But because of the context,
Yeah.
it becomes this terrifying whisper from beyond.
You know, I'm starting to think that the scariest part of these stories isn't even the ghosts or monsters themselves,
Oh, interesting.
but the way our own minds can just amplify those fears.
I like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's like our minds are the real haunted houses.
Totally.
It's interesting how these first two stories both kind of revolve around that idea of haunted places.
Yeah.
But the next one takes a bit of a different turn.
Okay.
It's called The Drug Lord's Confession.
Wow. Okay.
And this one takes us all the way to Japan,
Interesting.
where we meet these two Mormon missionaries who find themselves face to face with a drunk drug lord
Oh.
connected to the Yakuza, no less.
No way. That's intense.
Pretty intense, right?
Talk about a culture clash.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to imagine two groups of people more different from each other.
Totally.
You've got these young missionaries who are there to spread their faith.
Right.
And then you have this hardened criminal
Yeah.
who's clearly not a fan of organized religion.
Especially Christianity.
Yeah, especially Christianity.
It sounds like a recipe for disaster right from the start.
It really does.
And that's exactly what makes this story so compelling.
Right.
It sets up this feeling of unease right from the beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
You just know something bad is about to happen.
Oh, yeah.
And sure enough, things take a dark turn when he starts bragging about his illegal activities.
Oh, gosh.
Shows them a stash of money.
I bet those missionaries were terrified.
I can't even imagine.
I mean, they're in a foreign country.
Right.
In a situation they clearly weren't prepared for. And facing this real and present danger.
Exactly.
I think this story really highlights that scary stories don't always have to be about the supernatural.
It's true.
Sometimes real life can be even scarier.
Absolutely. This is like the kind of experience that probably stayed with those missionaries long after they left Japan.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it makes you think about how we often go about our daily lives
Right.
with this sense of normalcy routine,
Mm-hmm.
but there's always the potential for something unexpected to disrupt that.
Yeah, right.
Something even dangerous.
Yeah.
Have you ever had an experience where, like, a seemingly normal interaction suddenly took a dark turn?
You know, I can't say I've ever encountered a Yakuza boss, thankfully.
That's probably a good thing.
Yeah. But I think we've all had those moments where you realize you've misjudged a situation
Oh, yeah.
or someone's intentions. It definitely makes you more aware of your surroundings.
For sure.
For the people you interact with.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we're not always in control,
Yeah.
no matter how much we think we are.
That's a good point.
There are unseen forces at play, always.
Okay, let's move on to our final story.
Okay.
This one is called The Shadow by the Window.
Ooh, spooky.
And it takes us back to a more familiar setting.
Okay.
So it starts with this 15-year-old kid who's home alone,
Uh-huh.
hears knocking at the window.
Oh, man.
Like, it's the classic start to a scary story.
It really is.
And I remember being terrified of being home alone when I was a teenager.
Oh, yeah.
Every little noise would just, like, send me into a panic.
Totally.
So I can totally relate to this kid's fear.
Right. And just like in that first story with the brothers in the haunted house,
Uh-huh.
it plays on that primal fear of the unknown,
Yeah.
the feeling of being watched.
Especially when you're vulnerable.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
of course, it gets more intense from there.
Oh, of course.
So the knocking continues,
Mm.
and then he actually sees the shadow of a figure sitting by the window.
Oh, my gosh.
That would give me chills.
You know, even with the lights on, the idea of something lurking outside watching you is absolutely terrifying.
Oh, for sure.
But it's interesting because even when the police arrive
Yeah.
and the figure disappears,
Yeah.
that sense of unease remains.
Right. You're left wondering, what was it? What did it want?
Exactly.
Was it just a prank?
Yeah.
A case of mistaken identity?
Right.
Or was it something more sinister?
It's the kind of story that just sticks with you.
Oh.
You know, if we think back to that first story with the brothers in the haunted house,
Yeah.
there's a common thread here.
What's that?
In both cases, there's this unseen presence that seems to be toying with the main characters.
Yeah, it's almost like they're playing games with them.
Right. It makes you wonder if these entities do exist, what are their motivations?
It's a great question.
Are they just trying to scare us?
Right.
Do they feed off our fear?
Or are they trying to communicate something?
It's almost more unsettling not knowing the answers
It really is.
because it leaves so much open to interpretation. It allows our imaginations to run wild and fill in the gaps with our own fears and anxieties.
Oh, for sure.
And that, I think, is what makes these stories so powerful.
Okay, so we've explored haunted houses, whispering stalls,
Yeah.
encounters with dangerous criminals, and shadowy figures lurking outside windows.
What a ride this has been.
I know, what a wild ride.
It's been a wild ride.
But I have to ask,
Yeah.
what stands out to you the most from all these stories?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's amazing how each of these stories, even though they're so different, they kind of tap into that primal fear of the unknown.
Right.
Like Whether it's a haunted house or a shadowy figure, it's that sense of not knowing what's out there that just gets under our skin.
You hit the nail on the head. It really is. It's that not knowing. It's the mystery.
It's the mystery.
Yeah.
And you know what I find so fascinating is that these stories, they represent such a diverse range of fears and anxieties.
Yeah.
You know, from the supernatural to the all too real threat of violence.
It's true.
But despite that fear that they evoke, we can't help but be drawn to them.
I know. It's like we have this morbid curiosity about the things that scare us.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it speaks to the power of storytelling, right? Even if we can't know for sure what truly happened in these situations,
Yeah.
they capture our imaginations and make us question the boundaries of reality.
It's true.
They remind us that there's still so much we don't understand about the world.
For sure.
And that can be exciting and terrifying at the same time.
I know.
Right.
You know, one thing that really struck me
Yeah.
is that these stories aren't just about ghosts and monsters. They're also about, like, the human experience.
That's a good point.
You know, the brothers sneaking out, exploring the haunted house.
Right.
The missionaries encountering the drug lord. The teenager home alone.
Yeah.
Like, these are all situations that many of us can relate to on some level.
I think that's a key part of what makes them so effective.
Right.
They take these ordinary everyday experiences
Yeah.
and infuse them with this sense of the uncanny, the unsettling.
Yeah, and then it makes you question.
Right, and that forces us to confront our own vulnerabilities, our own fears about the world around us.
It's like they hold up a mirror to our own anxieties.
Exactly.
But in a way that's both entertaining and thought-provoking.
Right.
So what do you think is the takeaway for our listener? What can they learn from diving deep into these stories?
I think the biggest takeaway is the power of perspective.
Okay.
These stories remind us that there are multiple ways of interpreting reality.
Okay.
What might be seen as a supernatural event by one person could be explained away as coincidence or misperception by another.
Right. It's all subjective.
It all depends on your individual beliefs and experiences.
So it's not necessarily about, like, trying to find definitive answers or debunking every spooky encounter.
It's not about finding the truth.
Yeah, it's not about, like, proving or disproving.
Right.
It's just about being open to different possibilities.
Exactly.
And acknowledging that there are things in this world that we may never fully understand.
Exactly, and I think that's okay.
Right.
It's that sense of mystery, of the unknown, that keeps us curious, keeps us asking questions.
It keeps us coming back for more, that's for sure.
It does, it does. And who knows?
Right.
Maybe in seeking those answers, we learn a little bit more about ourselves and the world around us.
Well said. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Haunted houses, whispering stalls, encounters with dangerous criminals,
It's been a wild ride.
and shadowy figures lurking outside windows.
Absolutely.
But I think the most important thing we've uncovered
Yeah.
is the power of these stories to spark our imagination
Right.
and to make us think critically about the world around us.
You got it. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this one thought.
Okay.
If you could ask one question to any of the people in these stories, what would it be? What detail would you want to know more about? Let that question guide you as you continue to explore the fascinating and sometimes frightening world of the unexplained.
What a great question to end on. I love it.
That's all for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.